I was thinking, as Liz was saying, about how lots of men in the Bible, but very few women are spoken about. And I was going through a study on Exodus, and I've never noticed the amount of women who appear in Exodus. It starts with midwives who make sure that the children aren't, that they're born and not kept. And then you have Moses' mother, then Miriam, who puts him in the reeds, the basket in the river, and then Pharaoh's daughter. And then later on in the story, when they cross the Red Sea, it's Miriam and the women who go forth and they lead people in praise. And it's very easy not to miss these women because they're just in the background. But I think you'll find if you look through Scripture, although the emphasis seems to be on the men, you'll find that there are many, many women in the background. Guess the old saying that behind every good man, a good woman stands. So, so it's just a thought. I have to admit, I probably say this many times, but I have struggled to prepare for this morning because Mother's Day isn't found in the Bible, which makes it difficult. So tying it down was quite difficult, and I wasn't sure whether we were going to get lots of people who weren't Christians here this morning. Or what, and there have been times in this church when we have been packed on Mother's Day. We're going back quite a few years, and in faith, I'm hoping that those days will come again when people will come along to us because they want to celebrate Mother's Day. Well, of course, I'm using the term Mother's Day, and really, this has been using the right term, mother rings.
I don't let you say anything else.
Well, I remember, I seem to remember, but my memory might be wrong. Molly Reed, when she was here all those years ago, Wes must have been about a long time. If someone said Mother's Day, she would say, no, it's not Mother's Day, it's Mothering Sunday. And she would put the right in Molly's lovely way that she used to do this. So yes, today is Mothering Sunday. It's not Mother's Day. It's not what the Americans and other parts of the world celebrate. But Mother's Day is a day that brings many emotions. And so Liz has spoken something about that. There's gratitude and joy. And it's a time for those of us whose mums are no longer with us for reflection, remembering them and the effect they had on our lives. And sometimes, especially and for those women who have hoped to be mum, but for whatever reason it never happened, it brings sadness. And then there's those of us who have lost children, and there's that empty seat, those who should have been. And there's that tinge of sadness because they should be here. So there's lots of these emotions that are around Mother's Day. It's like all these celebrations where people should be full of joy. People are so different, all come from different places and different experiences. So today we gather together to celebrate those who cared for us and to reflect on the deep, selfless love that mother figures share. But have you ever stopped to ask what Mothering Sunday is all about? For many, it's just a time for giving flowers and gifts. But originally, this day had a very different focus. It was about returning home, not just to our earthly mothers, but also to our Mother Church. And the church for many years has compared the church to a mother because it's a place where we get nurtured, it's a place where we get cared for, it's a place where we get taught, all roles that are seen as mothers. So the church was seen for many years, although it's not necessarily a scriptural idea, although the idea of Jerusalem being mother is definitely it's a place of nurture. So in past centuries, going back at least to the 1500s, Christians would make a special journey to the main church where they were baptized. Of course, in those days, everyone was baptized as a child. There were very few who had been baptized as adults. And servants who worked far away from home were given the day off to visit their families and to worship together. And often children who were sent away into service very, very young ages would come back and they would pick flowers for their mums, wildflowers, as they returned, which is where the idea of giving flowers for mum on Mothering Sunday comes from. So today is not only about celebrating mothers, it's also about returning to our roots, reminding ourselves of where we've come from. It's about reflecting on love and care and the people, particularly our mothers, who have shaped our lives and made us the people we are today. Motherhood is one of the most beautiful yet challenging roles in life. Of course, as a man, I can't really know exactly what it means. I know what it means to be a father, but I can see from the mothers around me that this is a really challenging thing, but it's also very beautiful. Motherhood is not simply about giving birth. In fact, some women who are mothers, such as those who adopted their children, never experienced giving birth, but are still mothers in every sense. Because being a mother is more than just giving birth to a child. It's about giving them love, giving them nurture, caring, and all those things that we associate with motherhood. It's much more than just that experience of giving birth. Of course, in the culture of the Bible, being a mother was probably the height of achievement. And sadly, a wife who couldn't conceive was often looked down upon, not necessarily by her husband, only by her husband or even by her husband, but by the wider community. They sort of saw that maybe God's blessing wasn't. Thankfully, childlessness no longer has that stigma. And of course, that stigma really came right into our generation, but that's all gone. But over and over, we see in the Bible that God enabled women who couldn't have children to conceive. And we think of people like Sarah and Hannah and other women in the Bible who God intervened and allowed them to conceive and used that child in some special way. And the Bible is full of stories of women who demonstrated faith, courage, and sacrifice in their roles as mother. And we can take Hannah for an example. And we read her story in 1 Samuel 1 and how she longed to have a child. She was one of 2 wives, and the other wife, she had had lots of children, but she had none, and she was weeping and pleading with God in the tabernacle that she would receive. God would allow her to conceive, and we know the story of how she conceived, and she has Samuel, who grew up to be a prophet and a leader in Israel. Or consider the mother that I guess most of us think about when we think about mothers in the Bible, and that's Mary. I know us Protestants are a little bit wary about talking about Jesus and about Mary. Sometimes the only time Mary is mentioned is at Christmas, when you have to mention Mary, because we're afraid of all the other associations that came with it. But it's wrong. We should think that Mary was a woman who was used mightily by God. And when the angel Gabriel told her to bear the Son of God, she humbly accepted, despite the uncertainty and the challenges that lay ahead of her. There she was, a young virgin woman in a culture where being pregnant outside of wedlock would have brought shame. And more than a few wagging tongues, and add to that a story of how she got pregnant that would have caused a few laughs and side remarks. And yet she willingly took upon the role of bearing the Saviour of the world. And although Mary's pregnancy conception was unusual, to say the least, I think all women go for that period where they do not know exactly what's going to happen to their excitement. But there's also that, what's this going to be like, especially for the first child? What's this going to be like? There's apprehension as well as excitement. And it also shows the fact that Jesus came this way through a woman. It shows how much God values motherhood and women. And the fact that Jesus had a mother whom he looked up to shows how much God values motherhood. And Mary shows us that motherhood is often a journey of faith, one that's filled with moments of joy and sometimes of lacking of understanding and so deep sorrow. There are a number of stories of Mary in the Gospels, although she doesn't feature very often. Of course, it's all the stories we hear about the Nativity. There's a story of when they went to offer sacrifices in the temple, and Simeon came up to her and said about what Jesus would do, but he said to her, "The sword will pierce your heart." To know that right at the beginning, that something was going to happen, and she found that in her heart. And then we have the time when Jesus went missing and she had the panic. How many parents have had the panic? A child suddenly not there. And I had that panic of having to find Jesus. So she experienced that. And then later when Jesus, before Jesus had come into his ministry at the wedding at Cana, where she managed to twist his arm maybe to turn the water into wine. But also she was not a perfect woman, like although the church often has tried to make her out to be. There were times when she seemed to doubt slightly, and there was the time when Jesus was teaching and he was wearing himself out, and Mary and his brothers came along to get him. Because she was probably scared of what might happen to him, but Jesus had to say, "No, this is my mother, this is my sister, this is." Part of being a mother, part of being a parent is letting go. How many mums struggle when it comes to letting go of their children? It doesn't matter how old they get, they still really find it difficult to let them go, to let them see them make mistakes, to let them hurt. It's not an easy thing for Mary knew that. And another powerful example of a mother-daughter relationship, it's not really a mother-daughter relationship, it's that of Naomi and Ruth. And the book of Ruth, where we see how Naomi and her husband and her two sons go off to Moab, and her husband dies, her two sons get married later. And whereas one of the sons' wives goes off, Ruth sticks fast with her mother-in-law, which suggests that Naomi must have shown her such love and care and tenderness that Ruth saw her as if she was her own mother. They shared a bond that went beyond biology. And Ruth actually says to Naomi in Ruth 1:16-17, "Where you go, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and my God, your God." The story of Naomi and Ruth reminds us that motherly love is not just biological. It can be found in friendships, mentorship, and spiritual guidance. And I know actually, when I think back to my early years as a Christian, there were older women who I looked up to who were like mothers to me. And I know that Liz Palmer has mentioned a lady who she considered to be her mother in the Lord, who spoke to me and helped me in my faith. And I think that sometimes we sort of miss things. There were many men, but there were also women who helped to make me who I am in my faith. And there are certain qualities to a mother's love. So what is it that makes a mother's love so special? And I know by saying this is an ideal too high for any woman to actually get. But it's a sacrificial love. A mother gives herself without expecting anything in return. In Proverbs 31:25-28, it speaks of a woman who works tirelessly for her family, saying, "Her children arise and call her blessed." I can remember my own mum. I used to say about my mum, she was a woman on a mission. She was never still. She was always doing something. There was never a time. We never had much as children, but everything she had, she gave us. And she would go with the second-hand clothes rather than us going with the second-hand. She would take the back seat and everything to make sure that we were all right. And I guess all of us who've had good mums know that. Our mums often put their careers, their ideas on the back seat in order that their children might have the best that they can possibly give. Of course, sometimes for some mums, that's not always easy. And Jan and I was just thought of this, and we were worshipping. We were watching a documentary in the week about shoplifting, and a lot we just thought. But there was one young mum with her child who, in an abusive relationship, made homeless, and she was just living hand to mouth, and she was in tears because she'd been brought to a place where she was having to steal because she couldn't let her child go without. And my heart broke to think that she'd come to that place. No matter how wrong that is to do, my heart felt for her, and I can think of how many mums there must be that have brought to this, just done whatever they've had to do because they get the care of their child so much. Being a mum's love requires unwavering patience. Any mum can tell you that patience is essential. And I know that I don't have as much patience as my wife. But there are those years when the children is, why mum, and all of this. You're trying to teach your child to do the right thing, and they don't quite get it. You know, patience is something that is essential to a mother's love. Raising children, guiding them through life's up and downs, requires patience and endurance. Compassion and comfort is, I think, something that we associate with a mother's love. And in Isaiah 63, verse 13, and God really talks about this. It says, as the mother comforts her child, so I comfort you. God usually reveals himself as a father, but in this passage he is showing us that his love reflects the tender care and protection that we associate with motherhood. And maybe we should ponder that sometimes, like Liz was saying, with Jesus said about the mother hen gathering the chicks. There are other passages in Scripture. And it's not surprising in some ways because we are made male and female in the image of God. And there are some aspects of God's motherhood. Not that we should fall to God mother because we're never told. There are aspects of God that are reflected in motherhood that aren't reflected in I think we need to just be aware. Another thing that comes with the love of a mother is guidance of faith. Proverbs 22, verse 6 says, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. And right from early age, even biblical times, it would have been the mother's role to teach and guide and nurture the child into the faith of Israel. She would talk to her child about the stories of what God had done for them in bringing them out of Egypt. And it was often the mother's task, along with the father, but because the mother had most of the time, it would have been her that would have spoken to her child about what God had done for them. Now, I want to quickly say, actually, that Proverbs 22, verse 6 isn't a promise. It's a proverb. It's a saying of the wise. It doesn't guarantee if you train up your child in the way he goes, they will definitely not stray, because this isn't the case. But if you do it, the chances are much better that they will than if you don't do it. And there are children who aren't trained up in that way and still turn out right. And we don't know why. It's a crazy mixed up way that our world is. But if we do it it allows God to do something in that child's life that perhaps wouldn't happen without it. Of course, these qualities of a mother's love are challenging. I know that no mum or dad, for that matter, lives up to these standards all of the time. After all, we're fallen creatures. One of the great frustrations of being a mum or a dad is the sense that you're not or haven't been quite good enough. And it doesn't matter how hard you try, you feel that you've never done all that you should have for your child, especially if your child decides to go in a way that you wouldn't have wanted him or her to go. And actually that frustration about the things we wish we did better, the pain that we feel when a child does things that hurt him or her, is there because being a mum has great joys. But living in a world where things don't always go right means it can also bring worry, frustration, and pain. But fortunately, the joys usually outweigh all of it. So now that we've briefly reflected upon Mother's Day and on the qualities of motherhood, how should we respond? One of the things we can do to this day is to give thanks for the mother figures in our lives. If they're still around, to go and to spend some time with them, which I guess a lot of us are going to do today. Whether it's through a card or a phone call, or just spending time with that person. Whether that's your actual mum or a woman who has been particularly special to you. Yes. Proverbs 31 says, honour her for all her hands have done. And today is a day to acknowledge and appreciate countless sacrifices. And as I've been preparing this, I've been thinking a lot about my mum. We sort of missed out mourning my mum because she died just shortly after we lost David, and in the spurge of all the grief around that. But it's nice for me to think about her. She wasn't perfect. She certainly was loving. And I'm grateful I had her. And I think it's right. Us whose mums have long ago passed, we just think about them and remember them this day. And those of us who've still got mums, the grandmums, we spend time thanking them for all that they do for us. When we were little, we didn't realise. The other thing is, we can live out the spirit of motherhood in our own life. Now, for us men, that may sound a bit strange. Because not all of us are mothers, and but all of us are called to love, care, and nurture us. Galatians 6 verse 2 tells us, carry each other's burden. And in this way, you will fulfill the law of Christ. So who in your life needs encouragement, support, or a listening ear? This is a call for all of us to show love and compassion, care and nurture to one another. It's part of what we are as a church. If you added up all one another passages in the New Testament, you will find that we amount to quite a few. And it's part of being church, one another, and caring for one another, putting ourselves last, others might. All those difficult things, but all those things that we often miss being another. And thirdly, we can recognise God's unfailing love. For some, Mother's Day can bring painful memories, perhaps the loss of a mother, perhaps a broken relationship with a mother, perhaps the longing for children, perhaps the loss of a child. And if this is you, take comfort, because Psalm 27 verse 10 says, though my father and my mother forsake me, the Lord will receive me. No matter our circumstances, God's love is always present. It's always constant. It's always unshaken. As we leave here today, let's remember the true heart of Mothering Sunday. It's not just about celebrating mothers. It's about honouring the qualities of love, sacrifice and faithfulness. Whether you are a mother or a mentor or simply someone who has been blessed by the love of a motherly figure, today is a day of gratitude. I'll just say this blessing over you and then I'll finish. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine on you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his face towards you and give you peace. May we leave here with hearts full of gratitude, inspired to love God as he loved us. Be mothering somebody. God bless you all.